So, whatever happened to everybody's favorite classic sci-fi magazine, STARLOG? Let's find out. Movies,
music, and monsters.
Hey guys, Dan Monroe here, talking about movies, music, and monsters. My friends, this channel is approaching 85,000 subscribers in 4 months. Without you, there would be none of this. So, once again, thank you. Oh man, STARLOG magazine. Just about everybody read it, collected it, and spent countless hours upon hours reading the great articles and studying the amazing photographs from this classic sci-fi resource. I mean, if it weren't for STARLOG and Famous Monsters, I don't think I would have read much of anything when I was a kid. Famous Monsters of Filmland. Video on that coming soon? Stay tuned. You know, even though just about everybody I knew back in the day read STARLOG, the backstory behind this publication is really kind of interesting. So, let's dive in. Way back in the mid-1970s, a guy named Kerry O'Quinn and his high school buddy David Houston tossed around the idea for creating a magazine that would cover sci-fi films and TV shows. But at the time, these guys had no plans whatsoever to do any kind of a big monthly magazine release. Instead, literally, they wanted to do just one magazine based on Star Trek. The plan was to have the one-off publication contain interviews with the cast, previously unpublished photographs, and even an episode guide to all 3 seasons of the show. At least, that was the plan. One thing they were definitely concerned about was, obviously, legalities. I mean, did they actually have the legal rights to put out a magazine on Star Trek? So these guys contacted Gene Roddenberry himself with the intention of basically just getting an interview for the magazine. But Gene Roddenberry listened to their ideas and was really on board with the whole project. And it looked like just about everything was ready to jump into warp drive. That is, until Paramount Studios, which owned Star Trek, wanted their royalty cut, which ended up being actually more than they figured that the magazine would even make. So that was the end of that idea, but not the end of the project. Trying to find clever ways around this, O'Quinn figured they could start a magazine that only featured Star Trek stuff without the entire magazine being completely about Star Trek. So that's where the idea of a science fiction magazine actually came into play. It's really amazing the way things work out. I mean, think about it. If Paramount had not interfered, there might have only been one STARLOG magazine. So they started tossing around ideas for what the magazine would actually be called, like Fantastic Films or Starlight, but eventually they chose the name STARLOG, which I assume was perhaps a play on the Star Trek's Captain's Log. I have absolutely no historical reference for that. It just, to me, seemed like that might have been a possibility. Kind of funny that the name Fantastic Films was later picked up by a competitor magazine a few years later, but that's a whole different story.
I started a publishing company in New York years ago. We published one magazine and then another and another. We started with STARLOG, a science fiction magazine, which was the voice of science fiction for 35 years, dealing with Star Trek and Star Wars and all the wonderful world of science fiction.
The very first issue of STARLOG came out in August 1976 and was so unbelievably popular that it almost immediately sold out and contained a special collector's section on Star Trek. And to avoid the legal issues, the rest of the magazine had articles discussing the Bionic Woman, Space 1999, and a whole bunch of other really cool sci-fi stuff. You know, initially the plan was to have their magazine come out quarterly, but But after the huge success of the first issue, they decided to have a new magazine come out every 6 weeks instead. And then later on, was it every 4 weeks? I'm not really sure. If you know, let me know. And oh man, was this magazine popular. I remember as a kid literally running to the local drugstore just to see if the new STARLOG magazine was out. Seeing that awesome artwork and cool logo on the cover from a distance as a 9-year-old made me believe that the world was truly a great place to live. Okay, that was a little overboard, but you know what I mean. It was almost as cool as getting that yearly Sears Christmas wish book. Ah, those were the days. One of the many milestones that this magazine had was its 100th issue, which came out, I think, in November of 1985. This thing was huge and included exclusive interviews with John Carpenter, Peter Cushing, George Lucas, Harlan Ellison, Leonard Nimoy, and even Gene frickin' Roddenberry. And being a big-time sci-fi junkie, this is super cool. In 1985 and 1986, STARLOG teamed up with Creation Entertainment and produced a series of conventions called the STARLOG Sci-Fi Horror and Fantasy Festival. In fact, and this is so cool, one of the first times I ever saw the robot prop from Lost in Space was in a video by Mike Clark at the 1985 STARLOG convention. I later found out that this was, of course, the long-distance or stunt robot that was owned by Greg Jean. But at the time, I had no clue and I didn't care, and I remember thinking, holy cow, the Lost in Space robot was at a STARLOG convention. How cool is that? Even Billy Mooney was there, and wow, was that awesome to see. Man, do I love me a good old sci-fi convention. I mean, not only the toys and the dealer tables, but, I honestly do appreciate the love and dedication that these cosplayers have. Not only for their art, but also for the love of the shows and movies they represent. Especially all those Princess Leia slave girls. But again, that's another story. Anyway, back to STARLOG. I absolutely loved all the behind-the-scenes stuff in this magazine, as well as, sometimes, really cool blueprints. My brother and I literally had the STARLOG Robbie the Robot blueprints hanging in our back wall in the late 1970s. The cover artwork on these magazines were unbelievable. So many memorable images over the years that the moment I see them, it takes me right back to being a kid again, which is awesome. The artwork on the very first issue was just stunning. Just a beautiful painting of Kirk, Spock, and the Enterprise. The second issue, from November 1976, had a cover by Dick Cofield, which goes in a totally different direction, but really artistically very cool. Obviously, my personal favorite cover was STARLOG number 7, which had the super cool Star Wars cover and a big section on the inside about Robbie the Robot. And I can't believe it, but I don't even think I have that issue. Damn, I gotta get on eBay and take care of that. And what was your favorite STARLOG magazine cover? Well, drop it down in the comments and let me know. Yeah, the magazine was a lot of fun to look at, but the historical significance of this magazine simply can't be understated. I mean, the writers and reporters were on the scene for the beginning of Star Wars. All the Star Trek movies, breaking news on Raiders of the Lost Ark, Back to the Future, Terminator, Alien, and so many more. We could be here all day. It taught us all about the brilliance of creators like Ray Harryhausen and Willis O'Brien, and really let the reader dive in deep with interviews regarding Richard Matheson, Fay Wray, and even Charlton Heston. In 1984, these guys even had their own TV commercial.
STARLOG magazine takes you on incredible science fiction trips into the world of Star Trek, into space. STARLOG magazine shows you special effects secrets, blueprints and robots, spaceships and aliens, interviews with writers, movie makers, heroes, and villains.
That is pretty cool. STARLOG's 200th issue again followed the same format as the 100th issue, this time with interviews with Arthur C. Clarke and Tim Burton. However, in the early 2000s, the entire magazine industry was really on a serious decline. So the STARLOG Group was sold to Creative Group Incorporated, which continued to publish STARLOG, but also expanded the franchise onto the internet, satellite radio, TV, and video. Oh, this is tragic, but on December 5th, 2007, a huge warehouse containing all the back issues of STARLOG burned to the ground. That's why a lot of these earlier issues are so freaking expensive. Back issues of STARLOG were never reprinted. Whatever magazines are still floating around today, that's all there is. So, if you got them, hold on to them. But, of course, that still wasn't the end of STARLOG's problems. The STARLOG publisher, Creative Media, filed for bankruptcy in March of 2008 and was purchased by the Brooklyn Company, and thus we saw the end of STARLOG.com. It's weird, STARLOG.com does still seem to exist as a domain, but when you go there, there's unfortunately nothing there. Sadly, the last issue of STARLOG, which I believe was issue 374, came out in April of 2009, and that was it. But the legacy that these two guys had, O'Quinn and Jacobs, went far beyond just STARLOG. Over the years, they published dozens of different magazines, including Future Life, Comic Scene, and Sin Magic. Sin Magic was awesome. STARLOG also had a whole bunch of spin-off publications, including STARLOG Poster Magazine, STARLOG Science Fiction Explorer, STARLOG Presents, and also monthly magazines dedicated to Star Trek The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Star Trek Voyager. Well, STARLOG came and STARLOG went, but the passion and dedication to this magazine was nothing less than astronomical. And keep in mind, if it weren't for the creators of STARLOG, we would never have gotten another one of my childhood favorite magazines, Fangoria, filled with all the gory and horrific images of all our favorite classic slasher films. But that, my friends, is the topic of another video. I really hope you guys enjoyed that deep dive into STARLOG magazine, and if you did, and you like this kind of stuff, please consider subscribing. I've got a whole ton of new videos coming up that I know you guys are just gonna dig. As always, if you have any questions, drop them down in the comments, and I will do my best to try to answer them for you. And please feel free to stop back anytime as we continue our conversation on movies, music, and monsters. Movies,
music, and monsters.